I'll bet you right now that you're using plumber's tape wrong. And I don't mean a little wrong. I mean the kind of wrong that's been causing slow leaks behind your walls, drips under your sinks, and clogs in your aerators for years, and you never once thought to blame that little roll of white tape. Here's the thing. I spent over 40 years as a pipe fitter, and I can tell you that plumber's tape is the single most misused product in home plumbing. It's not even close. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 10 mistakes that almost every homeowner makes with this stuff, and I'll show you the leak signature for each one so you can diagnose problems you might already have. Stick around to the end, because I've got a bonus tip about plastic fittings that'll save you from a very expensive headache. Let's get into it. Plumber's tape seems simple, and that's exactly why people get it wrong. They grab a roll, wrap it on, and figure that's good enough. But this little roll of tape is responsible for more slow leaks and weekend callbacks than just about anything else in residential plumbing. The good news is, once you understand how it actually works and where it belongs, you'll never get it wrong again. So before we jump into the mistakes, let's talk about what plumber's tape actually does, because most folks have this part backwards. Plumber's tape, the real name is PTFE tape, doesn't create the seal by itself. I'll tell you, that surprises a lot of people. On a tapered pipe thread, like the threads on a standard water supply nipple, the seal happens when the male and female threads wedge together as you tighten. The taper is what creates the seal. What the tape does is fill in the tiny microscopic gaps between those threads and lubricate them so the fitting can thread on smoothly and seat properly. It's a helper, not the hero. Once you understand that, every single mistake I'm about to show you starts making a whole lot more sense. All right, mistake number one, and this is the big one: wrapping the tape counterclockwise. I would bet my best pair of channel locks that more than half the people watching this video right now are wrapping their tape the wrong direction. Here's why it matters. When you thread a fitting on, you're turning it clockwise. Standard, righty-tighty. If you wrap the tape counterclockwise, the fitting is now working against the tape as it threads on. It catches the leading edge and bunches it up, shoves it right out of the threads, and you end up with a wad of crumpled tape peeking out of the joint, doing absolutely nothing for you. The rule is simple. Hold the pipe so you're looking straight at the open end of the thread, the end where the fitting is going to thread on. Now wrap clockwise. That way, when the fitting turns on, it pulls the tape tighter into the threads instead of peeling it off. My Uncle Ray drilled this into my head when I was 17 years old. He said, "Wrap it with the thread, not against it." I never forgot it, and now neither will you. The leak signature for this mistake is easy to spot. You'll see white tape squeezing out from the joint, little shreds of it visible between the threads, and the fitting will have a slow weep from day one that never quite stops no matter how much you tighten it. Mistake number two is using the wrong number of wraps. I've seen guys wrap tape around a fitting one single time and call it done. I've also seen folks wrap it 8, 9, 10 times until the fitting looks like it's wearing a winter coat. Both are wrong. One wrap isn't enough tape to fill those microscopic thread gaps I talked about. You'll get a seep. On the other end, too many wraps actually prevent the fitting from threading on deep enough to get proper taper engagement. The fitting feels tight because it's binding on all that tape, but the threads haven't actually seated where they need to. You think you've got a solid joint, and 3 days later it's dripping. The sweet spot is 2 to 4 wraps. On most half-inch and 3/4-inch residential fittings, 3 wraps is what I use on just about every job. That gives you enough coverage without interfering with how deep the fitting threads on. The leak signature for too few wraps is an immediate slow drip right from the start. The leak signature for too many wraps is a fitting that felt great going on, but starts weeping a day or two later once the water pressure finds its way through those threads that never fully engaged. Mistake number 3 is one that drives me a little crazy, because the damage shows up somewhere you'd never think to look. Starting your tape wrap right over the very first thread at the end of the pipe. When you do that, as the fitting threads on it, shears off tiny fragments of tape from that exposed leading edge. Those little white shreds get carried downstream into your water line. They end up in your faucet aerators, your cartridges, your fill valves, your washing machine inlet screens. And you're standing there 6 months later, wondering why your kitchen faucet lost half its water pressure. And the whole time it was because of a little piece of tape you never should have put there in the first place. The fix is easy. Start your wrap one thread back from the end. Leave that very first thread bare. The fitting will still seal perfectly because the taper engagement happens deeper in the joint anyway, not at the tip. The leak signature for this one isn't actually a leak at the joint. The joint might be completely fine. The real signature is clogged aerators, sluggish fixtures, and fill valves that stop working right, all downstream from wherever you taped. By the way, if you're finding this advice helpful, do me a small favor and hit that subscribe button down below. I put out new videos like this one every week, walking you through repairs that'll save you a small fortune in plumber bills. Subscribing is free, and it's the best way to make sure you don't miss the next one. All right, let's continue. Mistake number 4 is a big one, and it's about taping fittings that should never have tape on them in the first place. Compression fittings and flare fittings do not get tape. Period. These fittings are designed to seal metal to metal. On a compression fitting, you've got a brass or copper ferrule, sometimes called a ferrule, that gets crushed between the nut and the fitting body to create the seal. On a flare fitting, the end of the copper tube is flared out into a cone shape that presses against a matching seat inside the fitting. In both cases, the seal is happening on a smooth surface, not on threads. When you wrap tape on a compression or flare fitting, you're actually doing 2 harmful things at once. First, you're preventing the nut from threading on as far as it needs to, so the ferrule or flare doesn't seat with enough pressure. Second, the tape can get between the sealing surfaces and create a tiny channel for water to follow right out of the joint. I've seen this more times than I can count. Somebody has a drip at a compression fitting under the sink, so they take it apart, add tape thinking that'll help, put it back together, and now it leaks even worse than before. The leak signature is a fitting that drips no matter how tight you make it, and when you take it apart, you can see tape residue smeared across the ferrule or flare face, right where the seal is supposed to happen. Mistake number 5 is closely related: taping slip nuts and rubber gasket connections. Your P-trap under the kitchen sink uses slip nuts with nylon or rubber washers inside them. The seal is the washer compressing against the pipe, not anything happening on the threads. Those threads are just there to hold the nut in place and apply pressure to the washer. Same goes for toilet supply lines with rubber washers inside the coupling nut, washing machine hoses, and garden hose connections. Tape on these joints is wasted tape. It's not hurting anything most of the time, but it's also not helping, and it tells me you don't understand where the seal is actually being made. The leak signature here is a drip from the slip nut, even though you can see tape on the threads. The real fix is almost always a worn-out washer or a washer that got pinched crooked when you tightened the nut. Replace the washer, skip the tape. Now listen, mistake number 6 is a safety issue, and I need you to take this one seriously. If you're working on a gas line, natural gas or propane, you do not use standard white plumber's tape. White PTFE tape is made for water lines. It's thinner, it's not as dense, and it can degrade when exposed to natural gas over time. Gas lines require yellow gas-rated tape. It's thicker, it's denser, and it's specifically formulated to handle gas. You'll find it at any hardware store right next to the white rolls, and it's clearly marked for gas. Between you and me, if you're doing anything beyond connecting a gas dryer or a stove with a flexible connector, I'd strongly recommend calling a licensed plumber or gas fitter. Gas work is not the place to learn by trial and error. But even for those straightforward connections, always use the yellow tape. 2 to 3 wraps, clockwise, 1 thread back from the end, everything I've already taught you. The leak signature for the wrong tape on gas is not a drip you can see. It's a faint smell of gas near the connection, and that is never something you ignore. Mistake number 7 is using tape as a gap filler on cross-threaded or damaged fittings. I've seen this one way too many times over the years. Someone starts a fitting crooked, feels it bind up, forces it on anyway, and now the threads are chewed up. So they back it off, wrap 6 or 7 layers of tape around there, and crank it back down thinking the tape will somehow fill in the damage and make it seal. It won't. Tape is not a gasket. It's not a patch. If your threads are damaged, that fitting needs to be replaced. On a steel nipple, that means cutting it out and threading in a new one. On a brass valve, it means a new valve. No amount of tape is going to save threads that have been cross-threaded. The leak signature is a joint that seeps no matter how many times you take it apart and retape it. If you've been chasing the same drip through 3 or 4 attempts, stop adding tape and start looking at those threads with a good light. Mistake number 8 is skipping a step that takes about 30 seconds, but makes all the difference. Not removing the old tape and residue before re-wrapping. When you take a fitting apart to redo it, every bit of old tape needs to come off before new tape goes on. Old tape leaves behind uneven ridges and lumpy residue. When you wrap fresh tape over that mess, it can't lay flat against the threads the way it needs to. You end up with voids and gaps underneath the new tape that give water a path to follow. Grab a stiff rag or a wire brush and clean those threads down to bare metal or bare plastic before you re-wrap. It takes half a minute, and it makes the difference between a joint that holds and one that doesn't. The leak signature is sneaky on this one, an intermittent drip that might not show up for a couple weeks, and when it does, it slowly gets worse as water works its way through those uneven layers. Mistake number 9. Buying the cheapest, thinnest tape you can find, and then getting frustrated when it tears every single time you try to wrap it. Not all plumber's tape is created equal. That ultra-thin bargain roll from the dollar bin is going to shred on you. It stretches unevenly, it tears mid-wrap, and you end up with a mangled mess on your fitting that's doing more harm than good. At the hardware store, look for tape that's at least 3.5 mils thick. Standard quality white tape works perfectly fine for most residential water joints. If you want to step up, look for pink tape, which is thicker and specifically designed for water lines. It goes on smooth, it doesn't tear, and you actually need fewer wraps to get a solid seal. A quality roll costs maybe $2 or $3 more than the bargain stuff, and a single roll will last you years of home repairs. That's money well spent. Mistake number 10, and this one is important. Ignoring pipe dope entirely. Pipe dope, also called pipe joint compound, is a paste sealant that's been around a lot longer than PTFE tape has. Most homeowners don't even know it exists. And that's a real shame, because there are joints where dope flat out works better than tape. On larger fittings, 1 inch and above, dope fills the thread gaps more reliably than tape alone. On joints that see vibration, like near a well pump or a water heater, dope stays put where tape can shift over time. And here's the pro move that I use on every critical connection. Use both. Wrap your tape first, 2 to 3 wraps clockwise. Then brush a thin coat of pipe dope right over the tape before you thread the fitting on. The dope fills any remaining gaps the tape missed, and the tape gives you that lubrication so the fitting seats properly into the taper. I've done this on thousands of joints over my career, and it's as close to leak-proof as you can get without welding. Now, for that bonus tip I promised you at the beginning. This one is about over-relying on tape to fix over-tightened plastic fittings, and I see it constantly. Plastic fittings on PVC and CPVC supply lines cannot handle the same torque that brass or steel can take. When you tighten a plastic fitting the same way you'd tighten a brass one, cranking down with a big wrench, you will crack it. And here's the real problem. That crack might not show up right away. Plastic fails slowly under stress. You over-tighten it on Saturday, everything looks perfectly dry. And by Tuesday morning, you've got water dripping from a hairline crack you can barely see with the naked eye. So what do folks do? They take it apart, slap on more tape, tighten it even harder, and make the whole situation worse. The right approach with any plastic fitting is hand tight, plus 1 full turn with a wrench. That's it. Don't go past that. Use 2 to 3 wraps of tape. Let the tape and the taper do the work, and keep your wrench hand gentle. If it drips at hand tight plus 1 turn, something else is wrong. Check the threads for damage. Check that the tape is wrapped in the right direction, and make sure you're not dealing with a defective fitting. The leak signature for cracked plastic is a drip that shows up hours or even days after the install. Often appears as a damp spot rather than an active stream, and gets progressively worse over time as that crack slowly opens up. Let me give you a quick way to diagnose leaks you might already have based on everything we just covered. If you see tape shreds peeking out of a joint and it's been weeping since day 1, that's a wrapping direction problem, mistake number 1. If the fitting felt solid going on but started dripping a few days later, check your wrap count. That's mistake number 2. If your aerators and faucet cartridges keep clogging with little white fragments, you're starting your tape too close to the end of the pipe. Mistake number 3. If a compression or flare fitting leaks worse after you added tape, take the tape off completely. That's mistake number 4. If a slip nut drips despite tape on the threads, forget the tape and check your washer. Mistake number 5. If you smell even a hint of gas near a connection wrapped with white tape, shut the gas off right now and redo it with yellow tape. Mistake number 6. If a joint leaks no matter how many times you re-tape it, inspect those threads closely for cross-threading damage. That's mistake number 7. If you re-taped a joint and it started dripping weeks later, old residue underneath is your likely culprit. Mistake number 8. And if a plastic fitting is slowly weeping and you know you really cranked down on it, you've probably got a hairline crack. And more tape is not the answer. That's how my Uncle Ray taught me, and that's how I'm teaching you. Before you go, if you got something out of this video, do me one last favor and hit that subscribe button. I put out new videos every week covering real-world plumbing repairs, money-saving tips, and the kind of know-how that takes years to pick up on the job. Subscribing costs you nothing, and it makes sure these videos show up in your feed when you need them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.